Hi, my name is Avery Albright, and I'm continuing to ask Master Chrism questions about Kundalini. Is it addiction or spiritual corruption?
I think this question came from Scott. And I'm going to say to Scott that addiction can be a product of spiritual corruption. Of course, you have to look at what is it you're being addicted to. Are you addicted to bliss? And is bliss a product of spiritual corruption? Not. I wouldn't say so. Are you being addicted to alcohol? And would alcohol be a product of spiritual corruption? Well, yes. Yes, I would say that it is. So, it depends really on where you're going with addiction. Spiritual corruption typically comes from discarnate consciousness forms that I'll refer to as entities. And these negative entities basically are allowed into the consciousness of an individual by that individual's Kundalini in order to offer corruption. And this is a test of the ethics and morality of the individual. This is a test of their steadfastness in maturing upon the Kundalini path. This is a test of how that person will respond to challenges that are given to their egotism. So, if they have a challenge come at them and it's, oh my gosh, it's so hard, it's so difficult to overcome. Well, maybe if I just take a shot of whiskey, maybe that'll smooth things out. Maybe I can deal with it then. And then, of course, the entity will go, well, one is not enough. One is not, have 3 or 4, and of course the individual tied into their egotism will take 3 or 4 more shots of that. And so, yeah, entities can form addictions within a Kundalini activating individual. And you need to be very, very aware of this. And it's not just in alcohol, it's also in pornography. Pornography can become an addiction because it ties in with the natural reproductive qualities of an individual. And so there are specific types of entities that will instigate a corruption in the reproductive functions of the first and second chakra. And these entities will push a person into being titillated or aroused within certain areas of corruption around pornography. And this can really, really be detrimental. I mean, if you look at some of the priests in different religions, I won't name the religion, but one religion now doesn't allow priests to have sex at all. And so, of course, as they're giving themselves to God and say, oh, I give my sexuality to the divine, well, the divine puts them to the test. And when they fail that test, they can fall into levels of sexual decline and corruption that would form pedophile tendencies. And this has been in the news time and time and time again. And so, yeah, entities can cause addiction. People not having enough self-discipline can allow what the entities that are giving corruption to allow that corruption to take hold. And once that corruption takes hold, then it wants to build on itself within the individual over and over and over. And, it can be difficult to break out of. So is it addiction or spiritual corruption? Well, it's both. Spiritual corruption is what causes addiction. But addiction is a real thing, regardless. And if you look at our society is addicted to drugs, addicted to medical chemistries that they push at us for the healing of specific maladies such as COVID-19, such as the common flu, such as any of the other vaccines that are developed, yellow fever vaccine, a polio vaccine, and some of these vaccines work well enough. And so that drives the addiction even deeper because, it worked. Therefore, if I want to continue living on this world, I have to do it the chemical way. I have to go to my chemical MD, and they're going to prescribe a series of vaccines for me, and I'm going to live for as long as I possibly can. And that is an addiction. That is an addiction. Before the I think it was around the 1920s, an oil tycoon wanted to take over and change formations of the American public's attitude about healing. And when they would go to a doctor, and at that time there were a lot of things that a person could do from the natural world that would allow them to receive healing without having to take chemical concoctions, and those were all taken off the table. Any medical school at that time that was teaching natural healing was defunded. It was defunded, and this oil tycoon defunded many. I mean, I think there were 66 medical schools in the United States at the time, and by the time that defunding was over, there was like 7 or 8, and they all decided to switch into petroleum-based medical practices. And this formed an addiction. This formed an addiction. When people gave their power, gave their choice to a specific format, or propelled by a specific individual, they formed an addiction on American Medical Association's basic premises of what is healing and what isn't. And so you have these people who made these great inventions that would allow, Royal Rife and these other geniuses that came along and found out that you can subject a person to different frequencies, and those frequencies will have an effect at eliminating any kind of a virus or bacteria without involving chemistry. And those people were killed, and their inventions taken off the market. Okay, and this just goes throughout the whole 20, from 1900 to the year 2000 and beyond into this year 2000. We're at 2026 right now. This has been how the public has been addicted to specific forms of healing. So, yeah, it's spiritual corruption first. This individual, through an action of greed, which was formed by entity connections to him and corrupting him, he had enough money, he had enough power in society to addict not only the American public, but the world at large, away from the natural healing graces that divinity had provided humanity on this world, into a very specific, limited format of chemical healing. And so you can't say that it doesn't work, because it does work sometimes. It doesn't work all the time, but it does work some of the time, just enough to keep the person addicted. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing when you're addicted to cocaine or you're addicted to marijuana. You got to have that payoff, right? That payoff is there. And that payoff has to come in the form of a blissful experience, ecstatic experience, hyped up experience, whatever it is, or super laid back and relaxed experience. These different payoffs that come from the destruction of portions of the brain. I'm talking about alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, some of these other things. And yet some of the greatest advances have been made with, within a spiritual test. Some of the greatest advances have been made from things that are not addictive. Okay, like ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is not addictive. I mean, I've seen, people take it time and time again, but it's non-addictive, and they receive information, they learn. It's almost like a school that you go to, and this can bring about very specific levels of healing. This can demonstrate what I'm talking about with regards to caustic and corrupted entities spreading that corruption into the individual. But you've always got to remember, it's the individual that chooses to listen. Something in their egotism is saying, "Oh yeah, okay, pornography, yeah, this is really good," and they get aroused and they respond to that arousal, and so, they tie the goodness to the corruption, goodness to the corruption, goodness to the corruption. And the same thing happens with marijuana or alcohol or cocaine or anything. The high that you get, that good feeling that you get, they tie it to the usage. The usage is tied to the corruption. The corruption is tied to the individual being offered this through a discarnate entity source. And so it's going to be, is it, the question is it spiritual or is it addiction? And it's definitely spiritual, then addiction.